Hi everyone. The occasion that we're going to be focusing on today are sympathy cards. Unfortunately, we will need them from time to time. And the technique that we're going to be doing is faux watercoloring. We're going to make all 4 of these cards in today's class. I think sending one of these cards to the recipient will surely bring a smile to their face. So let's get to today's class. Anytime I do scene stamping, I love penny black cling stamps. Their scenes are absolutely stunning. And this is no exception. This stamp set is called Stroll. I'm going to be using my stamp positioner for this. I feel like it's going to be the best bet for you because we're going to be layering on multiple different colors. So having a stamp positioner is key. I removed the mat that comes in the MISTI stamping tool, which is the stamp positioner I use. And I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of tape to the back side of that watercolored cardstock. So I can, because this cling stamp is quite big, I need to mount my card base in the middle of the MISTI so I have room to stamp because it's going to overlap and hang off the side. So butting it up on a corner is not going to work here. So add a little bit of tape to the back side and then press it down, and then you'll go ahead, line your stamp up, press the door down, and now everything is completely in place. I always refer back to the packaging when I use these penny black cling stamps so I can see where all of the images are because I'm looking at the images in reverse and I can't really make out what everything is. So referring to that packaging is key. So at this point, we're just going to use different color inks. I'm using all Catherine Pooler inks today. All of the colors and everything I'm using, I'll put in the supply list for you. Use whatever colored inks you have. Just her inks are my favorite inks and actually the only colored inks I have. So there you have it. So I'll just go ahead and start adding little bits of color here and there. Trying not too much to overlap the different colors because I don't want to contaminate my ink pad. But if you do overlap it, you can just swipe your ink pad on a piece of copy paper or scratch paper and it will remove any excess ink you accidentally got on there. So this part, I looked at the packaging. I noticed I've got some trees over there, so I'm going to go in with a green ink. And I'm not going to get complete coverage, but that's okay because we're going to do multi-stamping here. It's not going to matter. So I'm trying to just eyeball where the trees are. So my eyes are constantly darting back from the packaging to the stamp. If you don't have the packaging anymore, you can just stamp this image out in black ink and you'll be able to make out all of the images as well. But I always keep my packaging. So anyway, going in with my color, I think I'm pretty good on placement. It doesn't matter if you don't have it all. We'll fix that in a bit. And this is just regular water. I'm going to spritz it 2, 3, 4 times until I can see some of the bubbling or the bubbling of the water sitting on the stamp. And at that point, it kind of moves and the inks react to the water. And then I'll just give it a good press here. Making sure I'm getting good coverage. I want the stamp to make sure it touches the cardstock and I need to give it a little bit of time for the ink to transfer over. And look at this. Looks like I've hand painted this right now and it took less than 2 minutes to stamp. I love it. I still have a bunch of ink left on that stamp. So I'm going to put another piece of cardstock, add some tape. When I line up my cardstock, specifically in the middle of the MISTI, I always line it up under the words. That way, I know that my stamp is going to press where I want it to press. So I'll go ahead. I did nothing but close the door of the stamp. I didn't add any more water or anything. And then I'm left with this look. It's very pretty, but it's very soft. So I'm going to go in and add some more ink. So just clean off your stamp with a cloth or whatever you've got, and then go in and add some more colors. I'm going in with a nice deep navy blue here. And use whatever color you want. It doesn't have to be realistic. Your leaves don't have to be green. Your light pole doesn't have to be black. It's really whatever you want it to be. And then I'll go in and make sure that I've got some more. I need to cover up the ground. I can tell that I didn't get a good impression on the inking of the ground. So I'll go in and add a gray ink here. Again, all the colors I'm using, I'll put in the supply list, but feel free to use whatever ink colors you have. And then I did notice that I need to add some bushes. I need to add some color to the bushes. So we'll just do this multiple times. It's just this simple, but you can see why this technique does require some form of stamping positioner unless you're super good at eyeballing your stamps and lining them up, which I am not. So always spritz your stamp with water to just activate the ink a little bit, and then that's what gives it the watercolored look. Give firm pressure, And then bada bing, you have this beautiful, beautiful image here. You are going to set all of these panels to the side to dry. You need them to be completely dry before you assemble them onto a card base. Now again, I am using watercolor cardstock, but I'm using cheap watercolor cardstock. I'm using Canson XL, which you can get at any big box store. You don't need fancy schmancy cardstock for this technique. And again, I'm giving it a good second generation stamping to see if I didn't add any more ink or any more water to the stamp. I just added some paper and then I'm left with that look. So at this point, all I really need to do is clean off my stamp. And then I just need to touch up on the ground there. So I'm going to do this a couple more times. You pretty much get the gist here. Any inks you have, if you don't have ink pads, you can do this with, let's see, watercolor brush pens, anything that is fine to use on stamps. Do not use alcohol markers. That is absolutely not going to work and that will ruin your stamps. If you have gelatos, you can use those. Water Tombow brush pens, you can use those. If you have minis, you can really get into tight spaces and probably add a lot more colors. And the same with the gelatos and the pens. But I just like the look of inks. It's easy for me. My ink's next to me on my desk, so everything is within reach. I decided to do one more card with bright colors, so I'm actually making my buildings pink. There is no law with crafting. Do whatever you want, right? I know there are pink buildings out there. I went to Greece over the summer and I saw them. So there you go. But even if there weren't, who cares? Do what you want to do. If you want this to be all one color, make it all one color. The sky's the limit. It doesn't matter. So you just want to make sure that you get enough ink on your stamp. Then you want to spray it with water because that's what makes the whole faux watercolor look. Press your image down to your cardstock, and then you're going to be left with a complete masterpiece that your recipient is going to think you hand watercolored, because that's exactly what it looks like. Now you can layer other colors on top of your ink. I wanted to show you this. I'm going to actually add some brown to the buildings. So don't be afraid if you want to add some shading or if you just want to, deepen your colors. Grab a darker color. It doesn't matter. Just do it as many times as you want until you're satisfied with how it looks. I mean, I liked it as it was, but I think adding the brown here really made it wow. Like, it's like in your face coolness. Look at that. Look at that. That's just adding one color to the buildings. I mean, seriously, absolutely stunning. And when you're done, you'll have all of these panels to clean your stamps. I just ran them under the faucet in the sink. These are water-based ink, so they're not staining my stamps. It came right off. And now we're left with all these panels. Let them dry, and then we'll go ahead and turn them into cards. The first thing I need to do is to prepare some sentiments. Now, this class is focusing on sympathy cards. Doesn't mean you need to make dull, depressing cards. Sometimes people want happy, right? They're sad or whatever. So I'm going to do a little bit of heat embossing with my sentiments. So I'm just going to take a regular 8.5 by 11 piece of black cardstock and cut it right down the middle. And the stamp set and die set that I'm using is from the Ton Stamps. I adore this whole situation here. They have different fonts. They have coordinating die cuts. I'm going to show you exactly how the stamp set works. But you get about 15 sentiments every time you use this. It's just fantastic. Now, I am a big sucker for white on black. I love white text on a black font, like an old-time label maker. Call me boring, but I just love it. So I'm going to take, it doesn't matter which set you start with first. These are broken up into 2 images here. Start with whatever you want. I'm doing heat embossing, as I said. So anytime you do heat embossing, you need to prep your cardstock with some kind of anti-static tool. If you don't have one, you can add cornstarch and an old sock and make your own up. This particular one is from Waffle Flower. It's brand new. This is actually my first time using it, so we'll see how it works. And then I'll go ahead and close the door of the MISTI. Make sure everything's nice and lined up, which it is. And then anytime I do white heat embossing, I'm always using white pigment ink. My favorite ink is from scrapbook.com. There's many kinds of white pigment inks on the market. Use what you have. I find this easier than stamping with clear embossing powder and using white embossing powder. Stamping with embossing ink and using white embossing powder. I find this is easier to do. There, I think I got it right. So I'll go ahead and peel up that, and then we'll add the other part to it. You could go ahead and heat set if you wanted to at this point, but I didn't think it was necessary. And there are little squares. There's 2 squares at the top and a rectangle in the middle. And you basically just align those right over each other. You can line up the stamps, the words, but she's made it easy here. So you just line up those squares, set it right on top of the other squares, and then your whole stamp set is lined up. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to ink that up with some white pigment ink and then stamp it, and then we are ready to heat emboss. Now, with any kind of sentiment heat embossing, super fine, I can't stress this enough, super fine embossing powder is going to be your friend. You are going to get the best results if you use super fine. I'm going to sprinkle on, I'm using Wow White, super opaque white, super fine embossing powder. I just grabbed that piece of scratch paper from the garbage and then I use it to collect the powder and then funnel it back in. And then I'll go ahead and heat set it with my heat tool. A good rule of thumb is let your heat tool heat up for a good 15 seconds before you take it to your paper. It will make your embossing powder heat faster and more evenly. And then I just brush all of that powder, that anti-static powder away. You can use a kitchen rag or whatever. I have this little brush thing here and you're good to go. So it also has coordinating dies. So you do the exact same thing. You line up the squares and the rectangle with each other. And then I'm using some surgical tape to hold my die in place while I run it through my die cutting machine. The die cutting machine I use most of the time is my Gemini Junior. It's on the other side of my room. So you're not going to capture me doing that on camera, but I'm literally just running it through my machine. So you would run this through your machine, however, whatever machine you use, and then you lift up your die, and then you have all these super cool sentiments that are already cut. They're cut around the words, and it's also a mixture of script and text font, which I absolutely love. And she has many different sets of different occasions in her shop. All right, so I've got all these sentiments. So now I'm going to take those panels. They're good, they're dry, we're ready to go, but I do need to cut them down. I am planning on putting them on colored cardstock. So I'm going to cut these down to 4 by 5 1/4. My card base will be a standard A2 card base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So when you cut this down, it's going to leave you a 1/4 inch all the way around the card. You'll see what I mean in just a second. So you can use whatever paper trimmer, use scissors, whatever to just cut this down. And I'm doing it just because I want some of the colored card base to show through, because I knew at this point I did want to use colored cardstock. If you don't want any colored cardstock or you don't want anything showing around the edges, you don't want a border, you can just glue this directly down onto your card base and call it a day. So here are the sentiments. I have many different sentiments to work from, but since this is a sympathy-based class, I'm going to focus on that. I am using my favorite glue, Barely Art. I'm going to use this glue throughout the entire course. This is the only glue I use. It goes on white, dries clear. It has a precision fine tip that has never clogged on me, not once. And this is the same bottle that I've had since they released their entire line, which was several years ago. And I still haven't made it through all the glue, and it's never clogged on me, not once. So you can see I've gone ahead and glued that down. You can pick your place. You can put it wherever you want. You could have stamped this directly onto your card if you wanted to. But again, I just love the look of white on black. Now I wanted to match my cardstock on the bottom there. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply some of the same color pink ink that's in the buildings to the edges of my card base. I did have to stop and re-ink my ink pad because it was a little dry. So you don't have to save your ink. You only need to do the quarters because that's all that's going to be showing. So to get perfectly color matched cardstock, this is your hack. You don't need to go out and buy a bunch of cardstock. It's not going to match your inks anyway. All right, so then go ahead, glue this down directly to your card base. It's a top folding card, so it's going to be 5 1/2 wide by 4 1/4 long. And then you'll just glue that down. And another reason why I like liquid glue is because I'm able to move it around a little bit before it dries, so it gives me a little wiggle room if everything is not perfectly lined up. I had a little glue ease out the back, doesn't matter. I just wiped it up with a cloth, and here's this card. We're done and done with Deepest Sympathy. So you can do any kind of background stamps. I find background stamps for sympathy cards are fantastic. Flowers, nature, botanical, things like that for sympathy cards. We don't need all this boo-hoo stuff. They're already sad as it is. So I just find this is peaceful, and I think it's something pretty to look at. And you don't even have to have sympathy sentiments, if you will. You could have thinking of you, and that could be your sympathy card. You don't have to use the word sympathy in sympathy cards. Thinking of you, sending you a hug, things like that. You can even do something handwritten if you wanted to. So you don't need to limit yourself to quote unquote sympathy sets. They're not necessary. So here's all the cards that we made today. I don't know what that card was in there for, so I threw it off to the side, but we made all 4 of these cards in today's class. So they're great for any occasion, sympathy, all around, blank. Sometimes I keep my cards blank and I don't put any sentiments on them at all. And then they are universal designs that you can use for any kinds of cards. So when the time comes, I'll just pick them up and then add whatever sentiment I want, and you're good to go. So that was today's class, all about sympathy cards. So I will see you for our next class.